This is the story, my labor and delivery story for our first child. He is now quite big, as you can see. His labor and delivery was by far my hardest, and not because he was my first baby, but just circumstances and the hospital that I delivered at. He was by far the hardest delivery. So if you've been following me for a bit, you know some of the basics. My husband and I, decided, okay, well, let's stop using any method of birth control and just see if we can, have a baby. And we got pregnant 2 or 3 months after trying. We were never into taking temperatures and seeing when I'm ovulating. It was just kind of like, when we want to have some fun, we did, and just didn't use any birth control. And so we got pregnant within, I believe it was 3 months. So after that, I knew, I didn't know, but I got sick, like morning sickness right away. So I had my period, must have conceived, got nauseous and yucky, and I was actually at, because I used to volunteer with some youth, and I was at an all-nighter where you're just up all night having lots of fun. I was at that, and I was just so sick to my stomach, and at 3 o'clock in the morning, we went to McDonald's, to have something to eat, and it tasted so good and sat so well, and then I was sick again after that, and I got home, and I slept for a few hours, and I got up, and I looked at the calendar, and I'm like, oh my goodness, I'm a few days late. So we went and bought a pregnancy test, and sure enough, I was pregnant. And we were just over the moon. I had extreme morning sickness with him. It was like about 5.5 months, and I threw up every night. So I would wake up feeling decent, then I would eat and start to feel sick, and it would build and build and build and build and build until the night, and I would throw up. And I was very nervous and hesitant about taking any medication, so I never went on any of the morning sickness medications. I just suffered for 5 months, and I lost close to 10 pounds in the first 5.5 months. It was pretty bad. I was ill. I would basically go to work and come home and have a short nap, eat some supper, and go to bed. And I was in bed maybe at 7:30 at night. So then it led all the way up to, I started feeling better, and then at about 32 weeks, I got diagnosed. My blood pressure wasn't high, but it went over the amount that they wanted. I think it was still like 120/80, but because it had risen more than they like to see, I was put on minor bed rest. I was pulled from work. Then a week later, I went in to preterm labor, had contractions, had some show, and so I went to the hospital, and sure enough, I was technically in labor. So, and I was about 2 centimeters dilated. So they just, they thought, okay, we're not going to stop it, because at this point the baby would be okay. They let me go, but my body stopped naturally. And I was in the hospital because my blood pressure grew even higher at that point. And I was in there for another 4 or 5 days until they finally discharged me. They discharged me on severe bed rest, so it's just like I could go up to go to the bathroom, that's it. Have like a really, really quick shower, and then I was on my back the rest of the time. No blood pressure medication, nothing like that. It wasn't even discussed. And I had a nurse come in every day to do the fetal monitoring to make sure he was okay. Then, within, I think it was 3 or 4 days, it was 34 weeks, my water broke at night. So what happened was we had stayed up to watch a show. I went to bed, and within 15 minutes of being in bed, I could hear this pop. And it was like an internal pop, and then a gush of water. It was great. I'm so thankful I experienced it. It's really quite amazing. And I'm like, oh my goodness, my water broke. And my husband's like, what? Right? And he turned on the light and jumped out of bed. And he's like, what? It was completely out of a sitcom. And he just starts trying to get all his clothes on and stuff. And I'm just like, oh my goodness. Like I had a cold. And I'm like, oh, when your water breaks, you're supposed to smell of it, you know, and look at the color. And so I was like, I can't smell anything. Can you smell anything? He's like, no. I'm like, okay. So I called the hospital. I'm like, do I need to come in? I don't have contractions or anything. And they're like, yeah, you need to come in. Right. So when the water broke, it was about 11 or 11:15 at night. And we didn't have a birthing plan. We didn't have our bags packed, nothing. Oh my goodness, we were so unprepared because leading up to being put on bed rest, I was 32 weeks. I thought I had plenty of time to get this stuff together, but then I got put on bed rest. So we were at the hospital just after 12 o'clock and my contractions started, really minor. You know, I was like 3 centimeters dilated. It was nothing. And because of my blood pressure, they said they were going to give me a certain amount of time to labor on my own, but then after that, they would induce me if I wasn't progressing fast enough because of my blood pressure. They wanted this baby out. But then they made me labor on my back. So, you know, knowing what I do now, that's like the worst thing that I could have done. But that's the way the hospital ran. So I was on my back, you know, going through labor as naturally as you can in that position, progressing fine. But then it was about around 5 a.m. in the morning, I think it was when they decided that they were going to give me oxytocin on top of my natural labor. And so they did that. I wish I never had it because it was horrible. But I had it nevertheless. And I labored with that for just under 2 hours. It was fierce. And what makes it so hard is that you're put into active labor, the last stages of labor, but your body isn't ready to deliver yet. So you're just staying there and you have contraction on top of contraction on top of contraction, and you can barely breathe, and all while lying on your back. It was unbearable. So I got an epidural. That took things, you know, completely away. Still labored on my back the whole time. I was strep positive, so I had my IV in for that. I had the blood pressure cuff on me for my blood pressure and went off like every couple minutes. I had the fetal monitoring system on me the whole entire time. It was crazy. My husband ended up having a nap at that period of time because we've been up all night long, hadn't had any sleep. And I tried to rest, but I could not sleep. It just wasn't, I was like part nervous, part really excited. And, you know, I was going to meet my baby. So then at around 12 o'clock in the afternoon, the resident doctor came in and I still wasn't dilating that much. Like I think it was about 5 centimeters dilated at that point. So what they did is they popped the rest of my water because I guess there was just a little bit of membrane that was still there. And then everybody went for lunch. My husband went for lunch, the resident went for lunch, the doctors went for lunch. Everyone went for lunch except for my nurse. Oh, actually, no, my nurse did go for lunch too because she was by me the whole entire time because I was considered high risk. So she went for lunch too, but the ladies out in the front could read my machines. So they were all gone and my contractions picked up again. Like I had gone from feeling basically nothing to barely being able to breathe again. Like, and I was like topping up the epidural. And the nurse comes in, she's like, oh my goodness, like, because she could see my contractions on the outside. She's like, I think you're ready to go. Well, nobody was there. Nobody was there. And she checked me, and sure enough, I was completely dilated. I was 10 centimeters dilated at that point. It was like I dilated 5 centimeters within a half an hour, which in labor time feels like 2 minutes. Nobody was there at all. So they're like, okay, just, you know, don't push, just, you know, we'll let the baby continue to drop down. Well, everyone showed up around 1, which was good, and I was ready to start pushing. Started to push, and they thought, because of his size and his location, that I'd probably have 3 pushes, and then I would be done. But they didn't want me to push too much at first because, like, Mike, even though the doctors and the nurses had all arrived, Mike hadn't arrived back. And I'm like, well, can you maybe call him over the PA system if there's one? Because I'd like him here for the birth of his child. He returned about 1:30, so I had been doing, like, little gentle practice pushes because, again, I couldn't feel a single thing. I was completely frozen. So then he came in and I started doing some more pushes and I'm like, am I pushing right? Because I couldn't really feel anything. And they're like, yeah, you're pushing right. But he would not move.